All right, guys and gals, so we're back with another one. Before I get started, though, if you like this kind of content and it floats your boat, like, subscribe, comment. It helps the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. So today I want to start a small series on George Knudsen. So if you look at the page, you'll see that I have an interview there with a gentleman by the name of Norm Moote. Norm was Canadian, I'm assuming Norm is still with us. Norm's a Canadian CPGA professional, right? Mm. He has the distinction of having been George Knudsen's assistant. And he spent a lot of time with George every day for several years, a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, I don't know, as George was trying to set up his schools, um, which I think ultimately was used as a CPGA teaching manual in Canada. So you see that I'll put a link to the interview with Norm at the end of this. That way you can get to know who he is and listen to his story and his interactions with George Knudsen and the time he spent with George. But in the process, Norm wrote a pamphlet about 40 pages long. It's called Working with George Knudsen, or Working with Knudsen. So I thought that it would be a good idea if we if I put that out there in parts so that you guys can get familiar with it. It's actually a pretty cool little pamphlet. Talks about his game, the people that he came across, the instructors of the time and what they were saying, and the voila moment when he met George and things started changing and he started to understand more about the golf swing from Mr. Knudsen's perspective. So again, I'm going to put the link to the interview with him so you get to know who he is. And right now we'll get started with pamphlet Working with George. Okay. So it's audio all, obviously. And I hope you enjoy it. I think you will if you're into this kind of stuff. Remember, George Knudsen is one of the few real Hogan proteges. And he's kind of like, unlike John Schlee and all these other guys, he's been there, done that. And his clubs have the scars to prove it. And when they talk about the Hogan sound and the unique sound, George Knudsen made that sound. Considered one of the premier ball strikers in the history of the game. All right, without any further ado, we'll give it to Mr. Norm Moote. Thank you.
1. Working with George Knudsen. Like most golfers, I struggled with my game. I was the assistant professional at the Beverly Golf Club in 1980 and worked under head professional Bob Rose. Rosie, as most people called him, was a known tournament player and, at one time, played on the PGA Tour. He had this simple swing that hit the ball down the middle every time. He would always shoot somewhere between 67 to 72, sometimes lower, but rarely higher. My swing was anything but simple. I had this flat, laid-off, over-the-top move that would cause the club face to deliver a soft, glancing blow to the ball that drifted gently to the left, or at times pulled to the right. I'm a left-handed golfer. My ball flight looked like a wounded bird fluttering off in the sky. It had no intent. My golf swing would rarely repeat. In fact, before every game, I would hit balls at the range to find out what I had that day. Some days I would be hitting a fade, other days a pull hook. And then there were those days where I needed a good short game because I didn't know where the ball was going. I would leave the range after a 45-minute warm-up session, meet Rosie on the first tee for our regular daily game. He would walk out of the pro shop, hasn't made a practice swing, hit a ball, or made a putt. He just stepped up to the tee deck and would nail it down the middle and shoot his customary 67 or 72. He would usually beat me by 4 or 5 shots at Beverly, or whatever it took to beat me. One time, we were standing on the 17th tee and I was one up. Rosie birdied the 16th par 5, so he had the honors. The 17th at Beverly was a tough par 3. It played about 180 yards that day, was all uphill, and you hit to a narrow green which had this big bunker on the front left and tall pine trees directly behind the green. The landing area on the sloppy green may have been 10 to 15 feet wide. Rosie hit this shot that looked like he went after it. He definitely swung harder than normal. The ball barely got to the green, then bounced forward to land about 4 feet from the cup. As he walked off the tee deck, he made sure to show me the sole of his golf club, which had the number 3 on it. So I thought, if Rosie killed that 3-iron and just got it there, I am swinging my 2-iron. I hit it. Flush, it was going right at the pin, and it flew over the green, directly into the trees in the back. I didn't understand. Rosie and I hit the ball about the same distance. I had this look of disbelief on my face. Then Rosie explained a little trick he played on me. He choked up on the shaft of that 3-iron about an inch, and then wanted me to see what iron he hit. A little gamesmanship which I fell for, so he, in fact, didn't hit a 3-iron, more like a 4.5-iron. Without going over all the details, as we would walk off the 18th green, it was another humiliating loss for me. Rosie was a great guy to work for, and a good friend. I worked for Rosie for 3 years, and it was a wonderful experience. I learned so much from Rosie about golf, except how to swing a golf club. He was always eager to provide me with suggestions or help in regards to my game. But I soon learned that Rosie was a great athlete and gifted individual, and I couldn't relate or learn from what he was telling me. So the journey began. I started the search for someone that had the answer to what I was looking for. A clear understanding of what is required to create a consistent, repeating golf swing. I must have seen 25 different pros over a span of 2 years, read dozens of golf books and tips from magazines, discussed this quest with a number of my colleagues, and if I learned anything, it was that no one had the answer. It was like looking for something that didn't exist. A typical lesson would always start the same way. I would be asked to hit a few balls with a mid-iron. The instructor would check some basic stuff like my grip, alignment, etc. Then he would watch the ball flight, see what the result was doing or where it was going. The instructor then would make some kind of an adjustment, maybe move the ball a little forward or back in my stance, strengthen or adjust my grip in some way, or my personal favorite. Create some kind of image in my mind, like, as you start the downswing, it's like ringing a church bell. I've never rang a church bell before. How was I supposed to know what it was supposed to feel like? What these pros were doing was trying to fix the ball flight instantly. The quick fix, or Band-Aids approach. I remember taking a lesson from an older pro in Toronto that had a reputation of being a good instructor. He went through the typical stuff that all the guys did, and he had me swing my 7-iron. My ball flight was a slight fade on that particular day and lacked distance. He then asked me to set up with a stronger grip so I could see the first 3 knuckles of my top hand, and he closed the club face. Severely. The club felt really awkward in my hands, but I did what I was told. My weak fade was now a strong, hard hook. He said to continue to practice this way and slowly start to square the club face up in about a month or 2. The lesson cost $35 and lasted about 10 minutes. I thought to myself, what was that? What did I learn from that session? It was nothing but a Band-Aid, a total waste of my time and money. But that was a typical lesson back then. He fixed my fade and gave me a hook, a whole new set of problems. And by the way, it was next to impossible to hit a driver doing that. The longer the club, the less loft. So when I closed the face as much as I was told to, the only clubs it worked with was from about a 7-iron to wedge. Everything else would just sweep along the ground. In their defense, back in those days, there wasn't any video or many swing aids. The CPGA didn't even have a classification for a teaching professional. Most guys that taught were either head professionals, Class A, retired pros, or an associate apprentice professional, and teaching was just part of their job. Some guys enjoyed it, others didn't. The professional that taught back then had to rely solely on their ability to communicate and tried to get the student to feel the golf swing, or feel what he was trying to explain to them. Most people are visual learners, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to teach feel. Feelings are an emotion which can vary from day to day. How I feel something and how you feel the same thing may be totally different. So you could guess how frustrated I was at this point. After dedicating 2 years to finding the answer to my question, I was now convinced that golf lessons were a total waste of time. Golf magazines and their articles full of quick tips just made things confusing, and golf instruction books just contradicted one another. The only thing that all of those resources had in common was that they always related to the golf ball and what the ball was doing after it was struck. They tried to find a quick solution to correct the problem. The instructors came up with clever little sayings like ringing the church bell, serving a tray of drinks, and many, many more. So I thought maybe it's all up to me. Maybe I need to learn from trial and error, or dig it out of the ground, as Ben Hogan said in one of his quotes. After all, I am still a fair player and can shoot in the mid to low 70s. I was good, but maybe just not good enough to beat Rosie or play at his level. After all, he was on the PGA Tour. So I temporarily gave up the search. If there was an answer to my question, it wasn't in a golf magazine, book, or golf lesson. I would have to discover it on my own. I increased my practice sessions from 45 minutes a day to 3.5 hours a day. I would only play golf when I felt I was playing well enough to score. I would get to the golf course 60 minutes before my shift and practice, and stay a couple of hours after and practice. I was determined to find what I was looking for. My disciplined practice routine gave me varied results. I found that while on the range, I could get into a rhythm where I hit the ball quite well, but would lose that rhythm on the golf course. Some days, I would make a little discovery while practicing and strike the ball beautifully on the course, and the next day it would leave me faster than I discovered it. It was really a process of trial and error. I had no idea what I was doing. I would just make distinctions as to what was working and eliminating what wasn't working. It was kind of like trying to get to a destination without a road map. Eventually, you would get there. You hope? My efforts yield some success, but I don't think I was really any closer to finding the answer to my question than I was before. This was a hard, long process, and I often wished that someone, anyone, had the answer. I was even starting to think that maybe there isn't an answer. Perhaps it was something you are born with or without. One day, a friend of mine named Norm Moote, who was also a golf pro and a good player, was telling me about this George Knudsen clinic he just came back from. Knudsen was retiring from tour golf and wanted to start teaching. These clinics were for CPGA assistant professionals and held at Huntington Golf Club. The best part was the price. It was free. At this point, I felt negative towards golf lessons because of what I've experienced in the past, but this was George Knudsen, the best player Canada ever produced, and at a price where all it would cost me is time. How could I go wrong? Hitzroth had a swing that was very similar to a Tom Weiskopf, a long fluid motion with a pronounced inverted C, which was common back then. He had great rhythm and generated a lot of power. He started explaining to me some of the things Knudsen was teaching, and it was stuff that I have never heard before. Things like passive hands, the head doesn't need to be still, or keep your eye on the ball. You need to focus on the target, not the ball.